The gunshot that shattered Marlowe Patterson's wedding day came from her own trembling hand, pointed at the ceiling of the church, while her intended groom reached for her with hands that had beaten her mother senseless just hours before. She ran. Through the dusty streets of Kansas City, through the scorching Missouri afternoon in August of 1878, her white silk wedding dress growing brown with dirt, and her veil long abandoned on some nameless road. The horse she stole, a gentle mare from behind the general store, carried her west for 3 days until it went lame near the Oklahoma border, leaving Marlowe to stumble forward on foot with blistered heels, and a heart so shattered she wondered if the pieces would ever fit together again. The cabin appeared like a mirage in the gathering dusk, a solitary structure of rough-hewn logs nestled against a hillside with smoke curling from its chimney. Marlowe's legs barely carried her to the door. She raised one bleeding fist and knocked, then knocked again when no answer came. The door swung open to reveal a man who looked carved from the same hard oak as his home, tall and broad-shouldered with eyes the color of weathered leather, and a jaw dark with several days' worth of stubble. He held a rifle in one hand, pointed at the ground but ready. "Help me," Marlowe whispered, and then the world tilted sideways. She woke on a rough bed covered in furs that smelled of pine and wood smoke. The cabin's interior was spare but clean. A single room with a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with provisions and ammunition, and the bed where she lay. The man sat in one of the chairs, the rifle now leaning against the wall, watching her with an expression that revealed nothing. "You have been asleep for 14 hours, he said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel under wagon wheels. "I cleaned your wounds and gave you water. There is stew if you can eat." Marlowe struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in her feet. She looked down and saw they had been wrapped in clean strips of cloth. The man must have removed her ruined silk shoes. She was still wearing the wedding dress, now so filthy and torn it barely resembled its former glory. "Thank you," she managed. "I have no money to pay you." "I did not ask for money." He rose and ladled stew from a pot hanging over the fire, bringing it to her in a wooden bowl. "My name is Tucker Morrison. This is my land. You are in Oklahoma territory, about 15 miles south of the Kansas line." Marlowe took the bowl with shaking hands. The stew was simple, venison and vegetables, but it tasted like salvation. She ate slowly while Tucker returned to his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "My name is Marlowe Patterson," she said when the bowl was empty. "I was supposed to be married 4 days ago in Kansas City. You ran." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." "From the marriage or from the man?" Marlowe set the bowl aside and looked at her hands. They were scratched and bruised, the nails broken and dirty. "From what he was, from what I would have become if I stayed." Tucker was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "You are safe here. No one comes to this place uninvited." "Why?" The question escaped before Marlowe could stop it. "Why do you live out here alone?" Something flickered in Tucker's eyes, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Because broken things do not belong among the whole." The word struck something deep in Marlowe's chest. She met his gaze directly for the first time. "Can broken people heal?" Tucker stood abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening land beyond. "I do not know. I have not managed it yet." The next morning, Marlowe woke to find Tucker already gone. A basin of clean water sat on the table beside a rough cotton dress, simple and practical, clearly his own shirt fashioned into something she could wear. She washed as best she could and changed out of the ruined wedding dress, leaving the silk pooled on the floor like a shed skin. The shirt dress hung loose on her frame, falling to her ankles, but it was clean and whole. She rolled up the sleeves and went outside. The land stretched in every direction, rolling prairie dotted with scrub oak and cottonwood, the grass golden in the morning sun. Tucker was working near a small corral attached to the cabin, repairing a section of fence. He looked up when she approached but said nothing, just handed her a dipper of water from the bucket beside him. "I can work," Marlowe said, "for my keep, until I figure out what to do next." Tucker drove another nail into the fence post. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "And clean and mend and tend animals. My father had a farm before he died." "Your mother," Marlowe's throat tightened. "She is why I ran. My intended Garrett, he came to our house the morning of the wedding. My mother told him she had changed her mind about giving her blessing. She said she had seen bruises on the arms of his last intended, the one who broke off their engagement. Garrett lost his temper." She stopped, the memory too fresh. "I pulled him off her. She was unconscious but breathing when I left. I do not know if she survived." Tucker set down his hammer. "Did you kill him?" "No. I fired a shot in the church to stop the ceremony, to stop him from making me his wife. Then I ran before anyone could catch me. They will be looking for you, I know." Tucker studied her for a long moment. "The nearest town is Guthrie, 20 miles north. If you want to go there, I will take you tomorrow. If you want to stay here until you have a plan, you can work for your keep as you said. But you should know that I am not good company. I do not talk much. I do not go to town except when I must. This is a hard, lonely life." "Why?" Marlowe asked again. "Why do you live this way?" Tucker picked up the hammer again. "Because 3 years ago I killed a man. It was a fair fight, witnessed by a dozen people in a saloon in Texas. He drew first. But he was a boy, barely 18, drunk and stupid and trying to prove something. I was faster. I put a bullet through his heart. He drove a nail with more force than necessary. I see his face every night when I close my eyes. I hear his mother's screams from when they told her. So I came here, where I would not have to see anyone else's sons, where I could not hurt anyone else." Marlowe walked closer to the fence. "The boy drew on you first?" "Yes. Then you defended yourself. That does not make him less dead. It does not make his mother less destroyed. It does not make me less of a killer." Tucker turned to face her fully. "So yes, I am broken. I am a man who cannot forgive himself. This place is my penance." "And my penance," Marlowe said softly, "is wondering if my mother is alive or dead, wondering if I could have done something different, something better, if I could have saved her without running. So yes, I am broken too." "Maybe we broken things should stay together for a while." Tucker's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You can stay as long as you need." The days fell into a rhythm. Marlowe proved herself capable and strong, despite the delicate appearance of her small frame. She cooked hearty meals that were better than anything Tucker had eaten in years. She mended his clothes and cleaned the cabin until it felt less like a hermit's cave and more like a home. She tended the small vegetable garden behind the cabin, coaxing late summer squash and beans from the earth. Tucker hunted and maintained his land, fixed things that had gone too long without repair, and found himself talking more than he had in 3 years. At first, their conversations were practical. Where to find the best kindling, how to prepare venison so it would not be tough, whether rain was coming. But gradually, as August gave way to September and the prairie grass turned from gold to amber, they began to share pieces of their pasts. Marlowe told him about her father, a gentle man who had loved books and taught her to read from the Bible and dime novels alike. She spoke of her mother's garden in Kansas City, roses that bloomed pink and white against their small house. She described the moment she first realized Garrett was not the kind man he pretended to be, when she saw him kick a dog that had gotten in his way, the casual cruelty in his eyes. Tucker told her about his childhood in Tennessee, about learning to shoot from his father and to track game from his Cherokee grandfather. He spoke of the war that had taken his father and left his family's farm in ashes, of drifting west as a young man, hiring his gun out to whoever would pay. He described the saloon in Texas, the boy with red hair and freckles who had called him out over some imagined slight, the terrible slowness of the moment when he knew he could die or kill. "I chose to live," Tucker said one evening as they sat outside watching the sun set. "And I have regretted it every day since." "But you are still here," Marlowe said, "still working this land, still surviving. That must mean something." "It means I am a coward, too afraid to die, too guilty to live well." Marlowe reached out and touched his hand where it rested on his knee. It was the first time she had touched him deliberately. "It means you are human, flawed and guilty and trying. That is all any of us can do." Tucker looked at her hand on his, so small and pale against his sun-darkened skin. He did not pull away. "You should write to your mother. Even if you cannot go back, you should know if she is well." "I am afraid," Marlowe admitted. "Afraid she is dead and it is my fault. Afraid she is alive but hates me for abandoning her. Afraid Garrett will find me if I make contact. Fear is just another kind of cage." The words struck true. The next morning, Marlowe asked Tucker to take her to Guthrie. The town was rough and new, full of the kind of people who came to Oklahoma Territory seeking fresh starts or running from old mistakes. They found a general store with a postal service. Marlowe wrote 2 letters. One to her mother at their Kansas City address, brief and careful, asking only for word that she was well and could be sent to general delivery in Guthrie. The other to her mother's sister in St. Louis, asking the same. "It will be weeks before you hear anything," Tucker said as they rode back to the cabin. "Maybe months. I know. But at least I will have tried." That night, Tucker built the fire higher than usual and pulled out a bottle of whiskey he kept under the floorboards. He poured 2 glasses, handed one to Marlowe and raised his own. "To trying, even when we are afraid." Marlowe touched her glass to his. "To trying." The whiskey burned going down, but it warmed her from the inside out. Tucker poured another round, then another. They talked late into the night, their words growing more honest and less guarded with each drink. Marlowe told him about the wedding dress, how it had cost her mother 6 months of savings from her seamstress work, how she had felt like a fraud standing in the church in all that white silk, knowing what Garrett truly was. Tucker told her about the boy's name, Daniel Cooper. About how he had learned it later, after the shooting, when he stayed for the funeral because he felt he owed the family that much. About Daniel's mother, a widow, who had looked at Tucker with eyes full of so much grief he thought he might drown in it. "She said he was all I had," Tucker's voice broke on the words, "and I could not say anything. What was there to say? I am sorry I killed your boy. He drew first. None of it mattered. She was right. I took all she had." Marlowe set down her glass and moved to kneel in front of Tucker's chair. She took both his hands in hers. "You made a choice to live. That boy made a choice to draw his gun. His mother lost him because of his choice, not yours. It does not feel that way. I know. It does not feel like my mother's injuries were Garrett's fault either. It feels like I should have stopped him sooner, should have never agreed to marry him, should have protected her better. But we cannot carry all the guilt of the world, Tucker. We will break under the weight." Tucker looked down at their joined hands. "You asked me if broken people can heal. I think maybe they can, but not alone. Then let us try together." Something shifted in that moment, some invisible wall crumbling. Tucker pulled Marlowe gently to her feet and into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might shatter. She pressed her face against his chest and felt his heart beating strong and steady beneath the fabric of his shirt. They stood that way for a long time, two broken people holding each other upright. September gave way to October, and the prairie transformed into shades of rust and gold. Tucker taught Marlowe to shoot, first with his rifle and then with a pistol, standing behind her to adjust her stance, his hands warm and steady over hers. She proved a quick study, her father's lessons in patience and focus serving her well. "Why do I need to know this?" she asked after she hit her first target, a cassette on a fence post 30 feet away. "Because you should never be helpless. Because the world is dangerous, especially for women alone. Because you ran once and you might need to run again, and if you do, you should be able to protect yourself." "I am not alone," Marlowe said, turning in his arms. "I am with you." Tucker's jaw tightened. "I am teaching you to shoot in case that changes." "Do you want it to change?" "No." The word came out rough and honest. "God help me, no, but I am trying to be practical. Trying to prepare you for every possibility. Then prepare me for this one." Marlowe reached up and touched his face, rough with stubble, warm from the sun. "The possibility where I stay, where we figure out how to heal together, where broken people become something new." Tucker caught her hand and pressed it more firmly against his cheek. "I am 29 years old. I have killed a man. I live alone in the middle of nowhere with ghosts for company. I am not a good prospect for anything resembling a normal life. I am 22 years old. I ran from my wedding and do not know if my mother is alive. I am wanted for theft of a horse and probably for shooting a gun in a church. I think we are well matched in our unsuitability." A sound escaped Tucker's throat, something between a laugh and a sob. "You deserve better than me." "You do not get to decide what I deserve." "I do." Marlowe stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and brief, a question and an answer all at once. Tucker stood frozen for a heartbeat, then pulled her close and kissed her back, deep and desperate, and full of all the loneliness he had carried for 3 years. Marlowe melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for the first time since she ran from Kansas City, she felt like she had found something worth staying for. They pulled apart slowly, breathing hard. Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you. I have been since the moment you asked me if broken people can heal." "I am already in love with you," Marlowe whispered. "I think I have been since you wrapped my feet and gave me stew without asking for anything in return." That night, Tucker made up a pallet by the fire and insisted Marlowe take the bed as she had since arriving. But now the cabin felt different, charged with new awareness. Marlowe lay awake listening to his breathing, wanting to call out to him, wanting to invite him to share the warmth of the furs. But something held her back. The memory of Garrett's hands on her, bruising and possessive. The fear that she might not know the difference between desire and duty, between choosing and submitting. As if he could hear her thoughts, Tucker's voice came soft from the darkness. "Marlowe, I will not rush you, I will not touch you unless you ask. I need you to know that." "I know," she said. "I do know, but I am afraid anyway. Of me, of not knowing my own mind, of confusing gratitude with love. Of giving myself to you and then realizing I am still broken, still damaged, still running." She heard him stand and walk to the side of the bed. He knelt there, his face barely visible in the firelight. "You are not damaged. You are strong enough to run from a man who would have hurt you. Strong enough to cross half of Missouri and into Oklahoma on your own. Strong enough to ask a stranger for help. Strong enough to stay when you could have moved on. None of that is broken. You see strength where I see cowardice. And you see guilt where I see survival." Tucker reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We will learn to see ourselves as the other sees us, and maybe that is how healing happens." Marlowe caught his hand and held it. "Stay with me, just to hold me. I need to know what it feels like to share a bed with someone who will not hurt me." Tucker climbed carefully onto the bed, fully clothed, and gathered her into his arms. Marlowe tucked herself against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body, the gentleness of his touch. They fell asleep that way, two broken people finding wholeness in each other. October brought cooler weather and the first real storm. Marlowe stood at the window watching lightning split the sky while thunder rolled across the prairie like cannon fire. Tucker came to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "I used to love storms when I was a girl," Marlowe said. "My father would take me outside to watch them. He said they were God's way of cleaning the world, washing away all the old dirt and pain." "What did your mother say?" "She said they were dangerous, and we should come inside before we were struck by lightning." Marlowe smiled at the memory. "They were very different people, my parents." He was all poetry and dreams. She was all practicality and worry, but they loved each other desperately. "Do you remember your father well?" "He died when I was 12, so yes. He had a weak heart. The doctor said he could go any time, and one morning he just did not wake up. My mother found him in their bed, peaceful like he was sleeping." Marlowe's voice went soft. "She crawled in beside him and held him until I came to check on them. She was so calm, so quiet. She just kept stroking his hair and saying goodbye." Tucker put his arm around her shoulders. "And then she raised you alone. She worked herself half to death as a seamstress. She wanted me to marry well, to have security, to not struggle as she did. When Garrett started courting me, she was so happy. He had a business, a house, prospects. She could not see what he was. Or maybe she did not want to see. People see what they need to see." "Is that what you do? See what you need to see when you look at me?" Tucker turned her to face him. "I see the truth. A woman brave enough to save herself, beautiful and kind and scarred and perfect." Marlowe reached up and kissed him, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear. Just desire and trust, and the bone-deep need to be close to someone who understood. Tucker responded with a hunger that matched her own, his hands tangling in her hair, his body pressing against hers. They stumbled backward toward the bed, shedding clothes between kisses, urgent and laughing and alive. Tucker paused when they tumbled onto the furs, his hands framing her face. "Are you certain? We can stop. We can wait." "I am certain," Marlowe said. "I am choosing this, choosing you. Make me forget what it felt like to be chosen for the wrong reasons." So he did. Tender and passionate and achingly gentle, Tucker showed Marlowe what it meant to be wanted for herself, not as a possession or a prize, but as an equal. He learned her body with patience and care, paying attention to every gasp and sigh, every signal of pleasure or discomfort. And when they finally came together, it was not just physical but something deeper. Two souls recognizing each other and deciding to stop being alone. Afterward, they lay tangled together while the storm raged outside, the firelight casting shadows on the log walls. Tucker traced lazy patterns on Marlowe's bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. "This land, this cabin, they are not mine. I work for a cattle rancher named Samuel Preston, who owns most of the territory from here to the Kansas border. He lets me live here in exchange for watching his land and keeping squatters off his range. It is a good arrangement, but it means I do not own anything. I have some money saved, but not much. If you are thinking of a future with me, you should know what kind of future that is. Simple, rough, uncertain." Marlowe propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I ran from a future that was grand and comfortable and would have destroyed me. I would rather have simple and rough and uncertain with you than anything else with anyone else. You might change your mind when winter comes. It gets bitter cold out here. The wind cuts through the walls. We will be snowed in for days at a time. Then we will keep each other warm." Marlowe kissed his chest, right over his heart. "I am not afraid of hard times, Tucker. I am only afraid of facing them alone. You will not have to. Not anymore." They made love again, slower this time, savoring each moment, each touch, each whispered word of affection. And when they finally slept, wrapped in each other and the warm furs, the storm outside seemed like a distant thing, unable to touch the peace they had found. November arrived with frost on the grass and geese flying south in great chevrons across the pale sky. Tucker rode to Guthrie to pick up supplies and check for mail, leaving Marlowe alone at the cabin with a rifle and strict instructions to shoot anyone who approached before asking questions. He returned late in the afternoon with flour and coffee and salt, and a letter. Marlowe recognized her aunt's handwriting on the envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. The letter was brief and to the point, as Aunt Catherine always was. Marlowe's mother was alive, recovering slowly from a broken cheekbone and 3 cracked ribs. Garrett had been arrested for assault after witnesses came forward about the attack. The wedding had been annulled before it was even consummated. Marlowe's mother was asking for her daughter, begging to know if she was safe. The stolen horse had been returned by a mysterious stranger. The owner paid for its temporary use, and no charges were being filed. Garrett's family was furious but powerless to do anything. Marlowe read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Tucker held her while she sobbed with relief and grief and guilt and joy all tangled together. "She is alive," Marlowe kept saying. "She is alive and she wants me." "Then we will go to her," Tucker said, "or bring her here, whatever you need. I want her to know I am safe. I want her to meet you. I want her to understand why I ran and where I am now and that I am happy despite everything." Marlowe looked up at him. "Can we go to Kansas City? Or is it too dangerous for you? Missouri is not Texas. No one there knows my face or my name. We can go if you want to." They made plans to leave after the first snow, once the ground was frozen hard enough for easy travel. Tucker would take her to Kansas City. She would see her mother and make amends, and then they would return to Oklahoma Territory together. It felt like a dream, like something too good to be real. But first, there was the business of winter to attend to. Tucker spent long days hunting and smoking meat, laying in stores of venison and rabbit and wild turkey. Marlowe helped him bank earth around the cabin's foundation and seal cracks in the walls with mud and grass. They cut and stacked wood until the pile reached above Tucker's head. They filled every barrel and bucket with water from the creek before it froze solid. They prepared for survival. The first snow came the 3rd week of November, soft and silent, transforming the prairie into an endless expanse of white. Marlowe had never seen anything so beautiful or so lonely. She and Tucker stood outside the cabin watching the world disappear, their breath fogging in the cold air. "It is like we are the only people left in the world," Marlowe said. "Does that frighten you?" "No, it makes me feel free." She turned to him. "Like we can be anything, do anything, become anything. Like the past does not matter out here, only the future we choose." Tucker kissed her, cold lips warming against hers. "Then let us choose to be happy, starting now, today. This moment." They went inside and made love in front of the fire, then ate a simple dinner of stew and cornbread. They talked about Kansas City, about what Marlowe would say to her mother, about whether her mother might want to come live in Oklahoma Territory if she had nothing keeping her in Missouri. They talked about children, about building a bigger cabin, about maybe saving enough money to buy their own land someday. They talked about a future neither of them had believed possible a few months ago. As the days grew shorter and the snow piled deeper, the cabin became a world unto itself. Tucker taught Marlowe to play poker with dried beans for stakes, and she taught him the folk songs her father had loved. They read the same 3 books Tucker owned over and over, taking turns reading aloud to each other. They made love and cooked and argued about trivial things and made up and made love again. They were, in their small cabin in the middle of nowhere, completely and improbably happy. December brought bitter cold that turned the world to ice. Tucker had been right about the wind cutting through the walls. They hung blankets over the windows at night and slept pressed close together, sometimes waking to find frost on the inside of the door. But even the cold could not dampen their spirits. If anything, it drew them closer, gave them a shared enemy to survive together. 2 weeks before Christmas, Tucker came back from checking his snares with an unusual expression on his face. "We have company coming. I saw tracks in the snow, heading this way from the north." 3 horses traveling together. Marlowe felt a spike of fear. "Garrett, no way to know, but we should be ready." Tucker loaded his rifle and his pistol, set them both within easy reach. "You remember what I taught you?" "I remember." They waited. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, 3 riders emerged from the white landscape, bundled in heavy coats and scarves. Tucker stepped outside with his rifle, and Marlowe took the pistol and positioned herself by the window where she could see and shoot if needed. The riders stopped a respectful distance from the cabin. One of them, a large man on a bay horse, called out in a voice roughened by cold, "Tucker Morrison, that you?" Tucker relaxed slightly. "Samuel Preston, what brings you out in this weather?" "Looking for you, actually. Need to talk. These are my sons, Samuel Jr. and Marcus. Can we come in?" "We have been riding since dawn and the cold is like to kill us." Tucker looked back at Marlowe, who nodded. He gestured for the riders to approach. "Come on, then. Leave your long guns on your saddles." The 3 men dismounted and followed Tucker inside, stamping snow from their boots. Samuel Preston was in his 50s, weathered and solid, with intelligent eyes that took in the cabin's interior and Marlowe's presence with quick assessment. His sons were younger, in their 20s, clearly ranch hands by their bearing. "This is Marlowe Patterson," Tucker said. "Marlowe, this is Samuel Preston, who owns this land. Samuel, Marcus, his sons." Samuel removed his hat and nodded to Marlowe. "Madam, pleasure." Marlowe poured coffee for everyone while the men thawed by the fire. Samuel got straight to the point once he could feel his fingers again. "Tucker, I am expanding my operation, buying more land to the south, running more cattle. I need men I can trust to manage things. You have been on this land for 3 years and done good work. I want to offer you a partnership of sorts. You run a section of my ranch, manage the hands, oversee the herds. In exchange, I will pay you wages and give you a percentage of the profits. It is hard work, but it is steady and it pays well." Tucker was silent for a long moment. "Why me? You have men who have been with you longer." "Because you are honest and you work hard and you do not drink or gamble or cause trouble, and because I think you are ready to stop hiding out here alone." Samuel's eyes flicked to Marlowe. "Or maybe not so alone anymore." "I have been thinking about traveling to Kansas City," Tucker said slowly. "Marlowe's mother is there. We want to visit her. Go. Spring is better for travel anyway. When you get back, if you want the job, it is yours. If not, no hard feelings, but I will need to find someone else for this land." They talked details while Marlowe served stew and cornbread. The job would mean moving to a larger cabin on the ranch proper, working with other men, having neighbors and social obligations. It would mean giving up the isolation that had been Tucker's penance. It would mean rejoining the world. After the Prestons left, riding back into the snow-filled dusk, Tucker stood at the window staring out at nothing. Marlowe came to stand beside him. "It is a good offer," she said. "It is. But you are not sure you want it." Tucker turned to her. "I came here to be alone, to punish myself. To make sure I never hurt anyone else." Taking that job, living among people again, it feels like letting myself off too easily, or it feels like healing, like moving forward. Marlowe took his hands. You have punished yourself for 3 years. The boy is still dead. Nothing will change that. But you are still alive and you deserve to have a life. We deserve to have a life together. Not hiding, not punishing, just living. What if I am not ready? Then we will not take the job. We will go to Kansas City, see my mother, and come back here. We will figure it out as we go. She pulled him close. But Tucker, at some point you have to forgive yourself. Not because what happened was not terrible, not because that boy's mother is not still grieving, but because you cannot carry that weight forever. It will kill you. Tucker buried his face in her hair. How did you get so wise? I ran from a church in a wedding dress and stole a horse. I am not wise. I am just as broken as you. But maybe we can help each other figure out how to be whole. They celebrated Christmas in the cabin with a meal of roasted turkey and the last of the late squash from the garden. Tucker had carved Marlowe a comb from a piece of deer antler, smooth and beautiful, and she had sewn him a new shirt from fabric she had purchased on their last trip to Guthrie, using thread carefully hoarded for the project. They exchanged gifts by firelight and made love under the firs and talked about the future until the fire burned low. I want to marry you, Tucker said in the darkness. Properly, with a preacher and witnesses. I want you to be my wife, not just the woman I live with. I want that too, Marlowe said, but I am already married to you in every way that matters. The piece of paper and the ceremony are just formalities. Important formalities. You deserve to be married in a church with a proper dress and people to celebrate with you. Marlowe thought about her last attempt at a wedding, about the ruined silk dress and the gunshot echoing in the rafters. As long as you are the one waiting for me at the end of the aisle, I do not care about the rest. Kansas City, then. We will see your mother, make sure she is well, and then we will get married there. Start the new year as husband and wife. Tucker Morrison, are you proposing to me? I do not have a ring. I do not have much of anything to offer you except a hard life and a man with too much guilt and a job I have not decided whether to take. That is more than enough. Marlowe kissed him. Yes, I will marry you, again, properly this time. They left for Kansas City the second week of January 1879. When the weather cleared and the snow melted enough to make the roads passable. Tucker arranged for one of Preston's hands to watch the cabin while they were gone. They rode his 2 horses, traveling slowly, stopping at farms and small towns along the way. It took them 8 days to reach Kansas City, arriving on a gray afternoon when the city looked cold and unwelcoming. Marlowe's childhood home was a small frame house on the east side of town, painted blue once but now faded to a grayish color. Marlowe stood outside for a long moment, gathering her courage before walking up and knocking on the door. Her mother answered, and for a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other. Sarah Patterson was thinner than Marlowe remembered, her face showing the yellow remains of bruising along her cheekbone, but her eyes were bright and alive. Marlowe, she breathed, and then they were in each other's arms, both crying, both trying to talk at once. Tucker hung back, giving them space until Sarah finally pulled away and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. And who is this? Mama, this is Tucker Morrison. He saved my life. I am going to marry him. Sarah studied Tucker with the sharp eye of a mother assessing her daughter's choice. Come inside, both of you. We have a great deal to discuss. They sat in the small parlor while Sarah made tea with shaking hands. She asked questions, dozens of them, about where Marlowe had been and what she had been doing and how she had survived. Marlowe answered honestly, leaving out only the most intimate details. She told her mother about running, about the cabin, about Tucker's kindness and the life they were building together. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face going through a dozen emotions. When Marlowe finished, Sarah turned to Tucker. "You have been living alone with my daughter, unmarried, for 4 months." "Yes, madam," Tucker said steadily. "I know what that looks like. I know it compromises her reputation. That is why we came here, to see you, to get your blessing, and to marry properly before we return to Oklahoma territory." "My daughter does not need my blessing to do anything. She has proven that, but I will give it anyway if you answer one question." Sarah leaned forward. "Do you love her? Truly love her, not just desire her or pity her or want her gratitude?" "I love her," Tucker said without hesitation. "She is the bravest person I have ever met. She is kind and strong, and she sees good in me I am not sure exists. She asked me if broken people can heal, and I did not know the answer. But I am learning it with her. So yes, I love her. I will spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets choosing me." Sarah sat back, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Then you have my blessing and my gratitude. My daughter ran from a monster. I am glad she ran to you." They were married 3 days later in a small church on the west side of the city, with Sarah and Aunt Catherine and the preacher's wife as witnesses. Marlowe wore a simple blue dress that her mother made in 2 frantic days of sewing, and Tucker wore his new shirt and his cleanest trousers. There was no grand ceremony, no crowd of guests, no flowers or music. But when Tucker took Marlowe's hands and promised to love and cherish her all his days, and when Marlowe promised the same, the words were true and deep and unbreakable. Afterward, they had dinner at a modest restaurant, all 5 of them crowded around a table, talking and laughing. Sarah told stories about Marlowe as a girl, mischievous and curious and utterly fearless. Tucker told Sarah about his ranch job offer, about the possibility of building a real life in Oklahoma territory. Aunt Catherine, ever practical, asked about money and prospects and how they would survive. "We will manage," Tucker said. "We always do." That night, in a rented room at a boarding house, Tucker and Marlowe consummated their marriage properly for the first time as husband and wife. It felt different somehow, more official, more permanent. Afterward, Marlowe lay with her head on Tucker's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For opening your door, for letting me stay, for showing me that broken people can heal, for choosing me." Tucker kissed the top of her head. "I think you did all those things for me. I just had the good sense to let you." They stayed in Kansas City for 2 weeks, spending time with Sarah and helping her settle her affairs. The house was too much for her to manage alone, and she was considering selling it and moving west to be near Marlowe and Tucker. They encouraged this plan, excited by the idea of having family nearby. Sarah promised to write as soon as she made a decision. The goodbye was tearful but hopeful. Sarah held Marlowe close and whispered, "You did the right thing, running. I am sorry I did not see Garrett for what he was. I am sorry I pushed you toward him, but I am grateful you were brave enough to save yourself." "I am sorry I left you with him," Marlowe said. "You gave the women who saw him hurt me the courage to speak up. You saved more than yourself that day. You saved me too." The journey back to Oklahoma territory felt different than the journey out. They were no longer 2 separate people traveling together but a united pair, married and committed and facing the future as one. They talked about whether to take Preston's job offer, weighing the benefits of steady income and community against the loss of privacy and independence. "I think we should take it," Marlowe said as they camped one night under a sky so full of stars it looked like spilled salt. "Not because we need the money, though that helps, but because you need to stop hiding. You need to be around people again. You need to prove to yourself that you are more than the worst thing you ever did. What if I fail? What if I am around people and I hurt someone else?" Then we will deal with it. But Tucker, you cannot live your whole life in fear of what you might do. You have to take the risk. You have to try. Tucker pulled her close. You are braver than I am. No, I am just better at pretending. They reached the cabin in late February, finding it cold but intact. Tucker immediately sent word to Preston that he would take the job. Within a week, they were moving to a larger cabin on the ranch proper, a sturdy two-room structure with glass windows and a real wood floor. It felt impossibly grand after the sparse cabin they had shared. The work was hard, as Preston had warned. Tucker was responsible for managing a crew of ranch hands, overseeing the herds, making decisions about grazing and breeding and selling. He was gone long hours, coming home exhausted and dirty, sometimes not coming home at all when there was trouble with the cattle or the weather. But he was good at the work, and the men respected him. He found himself slowly rejoining the world, making friends, being part of something larger than his own guilt and isolation. Marlowe made a life for herself as well. She became friends with the other ranch wives, helping with cooking for the hands and tending the sick when injury or illness struck. She started a small garden near their cabin, planting vegetables and herbs and even a few roses, thinking of her mother's garden in Kansas City. She wrote letters to Sarah every week, long, detailed accounts of their new life, and received responses full of news from Missouri. Spring turned to summer, and with it came word that Sarah had sold the house in Kansas City and was coming west. She arrived in June, traveling by train to the nearest station and then by wagon to the ranch. Marlowe cried when she saw her mother step down from the wagon, stronger and healthier than she had been in years. Preston offered Sarah a job keeping house for him, as he was a widower with no wife to manage his domestic affairs. Sarah accepted, grateful for the employment and the chance to be near her daughter. She moved into a small cottage on the ranch, and suddenly Marlowe had family nearby, a mother to visit and share meals with and seek advice from. Life fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Tucker went to work each day and came home to Marlowe each night. They saved money and planned for the future. They talked about children, about when they might be ready to start a family. They hosted dinners with friends and attended dances in Guthrie and went to church on Sundays. They were, by any measure, living an ordinary life, but the ghosts never completely left. Tucker still woke sometimes in the night, sweating and shaking, the image of Daniel Cooper's death fresh in his mind. Marlowe still flinched when men raised their voices, still felt a spike of fear when someone approached too quickly. They carried their scars, but they carried them together. One evening in early September, exactly a year after Marlowe had first knocked on Tucker's door, they sat outside their cabin watching the sun set over the prairie. Marlowe was sewing, patching a hole in one of Tucker's work shirts. Tucker was whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a bird, a gift for Sarah's upcoming birthday. "I have been thinking," Marlowe said, "about what I asked you that first night, about whether broken people can heal. And what have you concluded? That healing is not about becoming unbroken. The cracks are always there, but they do not have to define us. They can just be part of who we are, proof that we survived." Tucker set down his whittling and took her hand. "You know what I realized? That I have not thought about Daniel Cooper in days, maybe weeks. He is still there, still a weight I carry, but he does not consume me anymore. I can think about other things, about you, about our life, about the future. Is that healing? I think it might be, or at least the beginning of it." Marlowe set aside her sewing and moved to sit in Tucker's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you, Tucker Morrison. I love the man you are, broken pieces and all. I love you, Marlowe Morrison. You saved my life as much as I saved yours." They sat that way as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge, two people who had found each other in the darkest moments of their lives and chosen to build something new. They had taken their brokenness and forged it into strength. They had asked if healing was possible and discovered that it was, slowly and imperfectly, one day at a time. By the winter of 1879, Marlowe was pregnant. She told Tucker on Christmas Day, watching his face transform from shock to joy to fierce protectiveness in the space of seconds. He pulled her into his arms carefully, as if she might break, and whispered his gratitude and love into her hair. The pregnancy was not easy. Marlowe was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Tucker hovered anxiously, asking Sarah for advice, bringing Marlowe anything she thought she might be able to eat. Sarah moved in with them for a while, helping with the household tasks Marlowe was too ill to manage. By spring, the sickness passed, and Marlowe began to show. She bloomed in the warm weather, her face taking on a glow that Tucker thought made her the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He talked to her belly when they were alone, telling their child stories about its mother's bravery, about the day she knocked on his door and changed his life forever. The baby came in late August of 1880, after a long and difficult labor that left Tucker pacing outside the cabin while Sarah and two other ranch wives attended Marlowe inside. When the baby's first cry split the air, Tucker's knees nearly gave out with relief. Sarah emerged hours later, exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, healthy and loud and perfect, and Marlowe is asking for you." Tucker went inside to find his wife propped up in bed, pale and worn but smiling, holding a bundle wrapped in clean linen. Marlowe held the baby out to him. "Meet your son, Tucker. Meet Thomas Samuel Morrison." Tucker took the baby with trembling hands, looking down at the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the perfect miniature fingers. Something in his chest cracked open, a rush of love so intense it hurt. "Thomas," he said softly. "Hello, Thomas." "Named for you and for Mr. Preston, who gave us this chance," Marlowe said. "Do you like it?" "I love it. I love him. I love you." Tucker sat carefully on the edge of the bed, holding his son in one arm and reaching for Marlowe with the other. "Thank you for this, for everything. For choosing me." Fatherhood transformed Tucker in ways he had not anticipated. He was completely devoted to Thomas, waking for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, carrying the baby in a sling against his chest while he worked when Marlowe needed rest. He sang to Thomas, the same folk songs Marlowe had taught him during their first winter together. He told his son stories about his Cherokee grandfather and about the brave woman who had run from Kansas City and taught him how to heal. Thomas was 6 months old when Preston offered to sell Tucker the land where the original cabin stood, a full section of 640 acres, for a price that was more than fair. It would take everything they had saved and then some, but it would be theirs. Their own land, their own future. Tucker and Marlowe rode out to the cabin one cold February day, leaving Thomas with Sarah to see the land with new eyes. The cabin was weathered but still sound, the same sparse structure where they had found each other. They stood inside, remembering. "This is where you ask me if broken people can heal," Tucker said. "This is where you let me stay when you did not have to," Marlowe replied. "This is where I learned what it means to be safe. Should we buy it, build a house here, raise Thomas and whatever other children come, make this ours?" Marlowe looked around the cabin, at the fireplace where they had warmed themselves through that first winter, at the bed where they had learned to trust each other, at the window that looked out over the endless prairie. "Yes, let us build our future here, where our healing began." They bought the land in March of 1881. Tucker built a new house over the next year, larger and more permanent than the cabin, with 3 bedrooms and a proper kitchen and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. He incorporated the original cabin as a storage shed, unable to tear it down, wanting to preserve the place where his life had changed. By the time they moved in, Marlowe was pregnant again. Their daughter, Mary Rose Morrison, was born in the new house in November of 1882, delivered by Sarah with Tucker's help. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's eyes, and from the moment she drew breath, she had both parents wrapped around her tiny finger. Life on their own land was everything they had dreamed. Tucker ran cattle with Preston's help and advice, building his herd slowly and carefully. Marlowe kept the house and tended an ever-expanding garden, selling vegetables and preserves in Guthrie for extra money. Sarah visited often, doting on her grandchildren, proud of the life her daughter had built from the ashes of that terrible day in Kansas City. The children grew. Thomas was serious and thoughtful, with his father's quietness and his mother's fierce determination. Mary was bright and curious, constantly asking questions and getting into mischief. Tucker taught them both to ride and shoot and track game. Marlowe taught them to read and cook and treat all people with kindness and respect. On summer evenings, they would sit on the porch together, the 4 of them, watching the sun set over their land. Tucker would hold Marlowe's hand and think about the man he had been when he first came to this place, alone and guilty and half dead inside. He would think about the woman who had knocked on his door wearing a ruined wedding dress and asking an impossible question. Can broken people heal? Marlowe had asked him that first night. The answer, Tucker knew now, was yes. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to live and love and build a future. Enough to raise children and work the land and be happy most days. Enough to look in the mirror without flinching. Enough to sleep through the night more often than not. The ghosts never left entirely. Tucker still thought of Daniel Cooper sometimes, still felt the weight of that death. Marlowe still dreamed occasionally of Garrett, still woke with her heart racing. But the ghosts had less power now. They were part of the past, not the present. They were scars, not open wounds. One day in the summer of 1885, a young man rode up to their house, dusty from travel, asking for directions to the Preston ranch. Tucker gave them, then offered water for the man and his horse. As the stranger drank, Tucker noticed the way he kept glancing at the horizon, the nervousness in his shoulders, the bruised knuckles on his right hand. "You running from something?" Tucker asked quietly. The young man's eyes widened. "No, sir, I mean maybe, I do not know. Did you hurt someone?" "I might have. There was a fight. A man went down and did not get up. I did not stay to see how bad it was, I just ran." Tucker studied the young man, seeing himself 7 years ago. "What is your name, Peter?" "Peter Connolly." "Well, Peter Connolly, I am going to tell you something. Running will not fix anything. It will not make the guilt go away. It will not change what happened. But it might give you time to figure out who you want to be next." Peter looked confused. "I do not understand." "You will. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but you will." Tucker handed the young man a canteen. "Preston is a good man, fair and honest. If you are looking for work, he might have some. If you are looking for a place to hide, his ranch is not it. But if you are looking for a chance to be better than your worst moment, you might find it there." After Peter rode off, Marlowe came out onto the porch. She had been inside, listening through the open window. "You gave him good advice." "I gave him what no one gave me, permission to keep trying." "You gave yourself that permission. I just opened the door." Tucker pulled her into his arms. "We opened it together. That is how it works." Their 3rd child, a son they named Matthew Daniel Morrison, was born in 1886. The middle name was deliberate, chosen carefully, a way of acknowledging the past without being controlled by it. Tucker held his second son and told him about the boy he had been named for, about mistakes and guilt and learning to live with the things you cannot change. "You will make mistakes," Tucker told baby Matthew. "Everyone does. But mistakes do not have to define you. You get to choose who you become." The years passed. The children grew into capable young people. Thomas, thoughtful and kind, became a skilled rancher, eventually taking over more and more of the daily work from Tucker. Mary, bright and determined, talked of becoming a teacher, of opening a school in Guthrie. Matthew, named for the past but living in the present, was still finding his way but showed signs of his father's steady nature and his mother's fierce heart. Preston died in 1890, leaving his ranch to his sons, but also leaving a generous sum to Tucker in recognition of years of loyal service and friendship. The money allowed Tucker to expand his own holdings, to build a barn and corrals, to dream bigger than he ever had before. Sarah lived to see all three of her grandchildren grown, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1895 at the age of 68. Marlowe mourned her mother but took comfort in knowing that Sarah's last years had been happy ones, surrounded by family, secure and loved. They buried her on a hill overlooking the Morrison land, with a simple stone that read, "Sarah Patterson, beloved mother and grandmother." Tucker and Marlowe grew older together, their bodies wearing down but their love deepening with every passing year. They added a room to the house for when the grandchildren came, as they inevitably would. They planted an orchard of apple trees. They built a life. On the 20th anniversary of the day Marlowe had knocked on Tucker's door, they rode out to the original cabin, now weathered and gray but still standing. They stood inside, remembering that night when everything changed. "I was so scared," Marlowe said, "so broken. I did not know if I would survive the night, let alone build a life." "I was already dead inside," Tucker said. "I was just going through the motions of living, and then you asked me that question. Can broken people heal?" Marlowe smiled. "I know the answer now. Tell me." "Yes. Broken people can heal. Not by forgetting what broke them, not by pretending the cracks do not exist, but by choosing to keep living anyway. By finding someone who will sit with them in the broken places and not demand that they be whole. By building something new from the pieces that remain." Tucker kissed her the same way he had kissed her in this cabin 20 years ago, when they were both young and wounded and taking a chance on each other. "I love you, Marlowe Morrison. You taught me how to live again." "I love you, Tucker Morrison. You taught me that I was worth saving." They stood in the cabin as the sun set, two people who had found each other at the worst moment of their lives and transformed that moment into a lifetime of love. They had been broken, both of them, shattered by circumstances and choices and the casual cruelty of the world. But they had healed slowly and imperfectly together. Outside, the prairie grass swayed in the evening breeze, golden and endless. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The air smelled of dust and grass and the coming night. And in the old cabin where a gruff cowboy had once opened his door to a lost bride, Tucker and Marlowe Morrison held each other and knew that broken people could heal, that love was possible even after the worst, that happy endings were real. Their children thrived. Thomas married a young woman from Guthrie in 1895, and they built a house on the far side of the Morrison land, staying close to family. Mary did become a teacher, opening a small school in town but returning home most weekends to visit. Matthew, who had his father's gift for handling animals, worked the ranch alongside Thomas, dreaming of breeding horses someday. The grandchildren came, one after another over the years. Tucker and Marlowe loved being grandparents, spoiling the little ones and sending them home to their parents tired and happy. They took the children to the spot where the original cabin stood and told them the story of how their grandparents had met, leaving out the more painful details but keeping the essence true. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I ever met," Tucker would say. "She saved my life without even knowing it." "Your grandfather was the kindest person I ever met," Marlowe would add. "He gave me a future when I thought I had none." And the children would listen, wide-eyed, to this story of love and second chances and the possibility of healing. As the new century approached, Tucker and Marlowe found themselves looking back more often than forward. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over land that was truly theirs, surrounded by evidence of the life they had built. The orchard heavy with apples, the barn full of horses and cattle, the house full of memories and love. "Do you ever regret it?" Tucker asked one evening. "Running from that church, ending up here?" "Never," Marlowe said firmly. "Not for 1 second. Everything I have, everything I am, came from choosing to run that day. From choosing you. I regret that you had to run, that your mother was hurt, that Garrett existed in the first place. But if none of that had happened, we would not have found each other. I would not have this life. So I cannot regret the path that led me here, even though parts of it were terrible." Tucker squeezed her hand. "You asked me if broken people can heal. I think the better question is, can broken people love? And the answer is yes, broken people can love. Maybe better than whole people, because they know the value of what they have. They know how easily it can be lost." In 1900, Tucker and Marlowe celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary and Marlowe's 43rd birthday with a party that brought together nearly 100 people. Friends from the ranch, neighbors from surrounding properties, people from town, all gathering to celebrate a couple who had become pillars of their small community. Preston's sons made speeches about Tucker's integrity and hard work. The teacher who had trained Mary spoke about Marlowe's kindness and dedication to education. The children and grandchildren performed a play they had written about a cowboy and a lost bride who found each other and lived happily ever after. Late in the evening, when the party had wound down and most guests had gone home, Tucker and Marlowe sat on their porch swing, watching the stars emerge. They were older now, both of them, their hair more gray than dark, their faces lined by sun and time. But they were still them, still together, still in love. 21 years, Marlowe said, plus the months before we were married. Nearly 22 years since I knocked on your door. Best decision I ever made opening that door. Best decision I ever made knocking." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of knowing another person completely. Eventually, Tucker spoke again. "I do not think about Daniel Cooper much anymore, maybe once a month, maybe less. When I do, I can remember him without the guilt crushing me. I can wish things had been different but accept that they were not. I think that might be what healing looks like." "I have not had a nightmare about Garrett in over a year," Marlowe said. "When I think of Kansas City now, I think of my mother and my father and the good parts of my childhood. The bad parts are still there, but they do not define the whole story. So we healed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough." Tucker pulled her closer and they sat together in the gathering dark, two people who had asked impossible questions and found that the answers were simpler than they thought. Love healed. Time healed. Choosing to keep living healed. It was not magic, it was not instant, but it was real. The years continued their steady march. Tucker and Marlowe grew into their 60s and then their 70s, their pace slowing but their bond deepening. They spent more time sitting on the porch and less time working the land, content to let their children and grandchildren handle the physical labor while they offered advice and encouragement. In 1910, on a warm spring evening, Tucker suffered a stroke. It was mild, leaving him weak on one side but still himself, still present. Marlowe nursed him with the same fierce dedication he had shown her all those years ago when she arrived at his door broken and bleeding. "You are not leaving me yet," she told him firmly. "We still have more life to live. More sunsets to watch, more grandchildren to spoil, more love to give." And Tucker, stubborn and determined not to disappoint her, recovered. Not completely, he walked with a limp now and his right hand trembled sometimes, but he was alive and present and still deeply in love with his wife. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1911 with a quiet dinner, just the two of them and their children. Tucker gave Marlowe a gold locket with pictures of all three children and as many grandchildren as would fit. Marlowe gave Tucker a book she had made by hand, filling it with memories of their life together, illustrated with small drawings and pressed flowers from her garden. "Read it to me," Tucker said, his voice still rough from the stroke but strong. So Marlowe read, and they spent the evening reliving their life. The day she knocked on his door, the first time they said they loved each other, the births of their children, the building of their house, the planting of the orchard, the quiet moments and the grand adventures. All of it documented in Marlowe's careful handwriting, a testament to a life well lived. When she finished, Tucker had tears in his eyes. "We did well, did we not? Despite everything, despite being broken, we built something good." "We built something wonderful," Marlowe corrected. "We built a life worth living, a family worth fighting for, a love worth celebrating." Tucker Morrison died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1915 at the age of 66. He was at home in the house he had built, surrounded by the family he had created. Marlowe was beside him, holding his hand, whispering her love into his ear as he slipped away. The funeral was attended by more than 200 people. Friends, neighbors, former ranch hands, people whose lives Tucker had touched in ways big and small. They spoke of his integrity, his kindness, his quiet strength. They spoke of the way he had loved his wife and raised his children and worked his land. They spoke of a man who had made mistakes but refused to let those mistakes define him. Marlowe stood at his grave on the hill beside Sarah's and spoke her own words. "My husband asked me once if broken people can heal. We spent 34 years answering that question together. The answer is yes. Yes, we can heal. Yes, we can love. Yes, we can build beautiful lives from terrible beginnings." Tucker taught me that. He showed me every single day that healing is possible, that love is real, that second chances exist. I will miss him until my last breath, but I will never regret a single moment we had together. She lived another 3 years, cared for by her children, spending her days in the house she and Tucker had built, tending the garden and the orchard, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren be born. She wrote letters to Tucker in a journal, telling him about everything he was missing, keeping him close even though he was gone. Marlowe Morrison died in her sleep in the summer of 1918, at the age of 61. She was buried beside Tucker on the hill, her stone reading simply Marlowe Morrison, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. The family gathered after the funeral, all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, standing in the house that Tucker had built for Marlowe all those years ago. Thomas, now 58 and gray himself, stood before them and told the story of how their grandparents had met. "Your grandmother knocked on a door in the middle of nowhere, broken and scared and not sure she would survive," Thomas said. "Your grandfather opened that door even though he had every reason to turn her away. They built a life together from that moment. They showed all of us that healing is possible, that love can grow in the most unlikely places, that broken people can become whole when they find each other." He held up Marlowe's handmade book, the one she had given Tucker on their 30th anniversary. This is their story. This is our legacy. We come from two broken people who chose to heal together, who chose love over fear, who chose to build rather than destroy. That is what I want all of you to remember. That is what I want you to carry forward. The Morrison family continued to thrive for generations. The land that Tucker and Marlowe had built their life on stayed in the family, passed down from parents to children to grandchildren. The original cabin, weathered but still standing, became a family shrine, a place to remember where it all began. And in the town of Guthrie, in the small church where Tucker and Marlowe's descendants still worshipped, there was a plaque that read, "In memory of Tucker and Marlowe Morrison, who proved that broken people can heal and that love is always possible, even after the worst." May their story inspire us all to open our doors to those in need, to offer grace to the broken, and to believe in the possibility of new beginnings. Because that was their legacy in the end. Not the land or the money or even the family, though those things mattered. Their legacy was the answer to the question Marlowe had asked that first night, standing in Tucker's doorway in her ruined wedding dress. Can broken people heal? Yes, through love, through time, through choosing each other every single day. Through building a life together, piece by piece, moment by moment. Through refusing to let their worst moments define them. Through forgiveness both of others and of themselves. Tucker and Marlowe Morrison had been broken. Life had shattered them both. But they had found each other in their brokenness and built something beautiful. They had healed together, and in doing so had created a love story that would inspire their family for generations. That was their answer. That was their truth. That was their happily ever after.